Hello and welcome to the Ode to Cinema podcast. I'm Caleb Meyer and I'm joined again by Luke Crawford.
Hello there.
And today we're going to be discussing the Rise of Skywalker. I literally just got back from seeing it like 20 minutes ago. So this is going to be kind of me formulating my opinion as we talk about it. Mm-hmm. Luke just saw it twice.
I did.
Within 24 hours.
Yeah, I did.
Unexpectedly. So Luke, what are your first impression or second impressions right off the bat?
My first impressions were, I kind of went out of it like, yeah, it was okay. Just because I don't know how specific you want me to get into the details or if we're doing spoilers yet.
We might as well just jump right into spoilers. Warning for everyone out there, we're going to be talking spoilers.
Got it. So, I mean, as much as I tried to go into this with little to no expectations, but like I ended up, I don't know, there were moments in and throughout where I was a little disappointed just because I felt like it was very, very rushed. It felt like it was trying to course correct what a lot of people didn't like, but also did like about Last Jedi, to where they were trying to be in the middle and have fun with it and try to have like this big explosive adventure, but it just felt like it moved so incredibly fast that it didn't take the time to where I will say off the bat, I like The Last Jedi, to where I know a lot of people don't. I don't remember what your thoughts are on it, but
I go back and forth on it.
I
think there's a lot
that's also
to talk
me.
about.
That's also me not saying it's a perfect movie. There are tons of things that are, I think, wrong with it. But I think my first impression after seeing Rise of Skywalker were a little disappointed.
Yeah, it didn't like blow me out of the water, but I, coming out of it, thought it was a good conclusion overall to the whole trilogy of trilogies, you know?
Yeah.
I didn't think it was a perfect movie, and it didn't honestly like betray The Last Jedi as much as I expected it to.
There were I felt like there were a couple like jabs, but it didn't really like do a 180 but there were moments where I felt like it was kind of just like, hey, you know what happened in The Last Jedi? That didn't matter at all.
Yep. But I think JJ did a good job with it. With concluding that and kind of following the wishes of Mama Disney or Papa Disney.
Yeah.
I don't know. But overall, like, I think it The Last Jedi was definitely like a departure from what Star Wars has been in terms of like being kind of like a fun space adventure. And I like it for that. The fact that it went in a new direction.
That's what I would say too. Yeah.
But I think like this did a great job of bringing it back to that fun space adventure, and like it did like cancel out some of The Last Jedi, quite a bit of The Last Jedi, but I think it still brought a good conclusion.
I think
it still had some compelling character stuff.
I think the big problem I had with this and also with The Last Jedi, it just felt like there was a huge lack of planning or forethought, to where like they rushed into it, made The Force Awakens, which set up this whole arc with Rey and Finn and Poe and Kylo Ren, where it was a bunch of like, I love the actors in these movies and I really looked forward to seeing what they'd become, but it just seemed like a lack of planning on like the people at Disney or whoever, to where like Rian Johnson went in going, I'm going to make this Star Wars movie because I think it'll be interesting. And then it didn't pan out the way they thought it would. And so this feels like a big course correction to kind of like, well, it feels kind of like panicking. Like we got to wrap it up somehow. Cause it's like the end of Last Jedi didn't really put it where we want it. And that's kind of how I felt because of from Rise of Skywalker.
To me, it feels like they threw everything at the wall and hoped most of it would stick.
Yeah. Because there were a lot of it felt like in this movie it spent a lot of time with Rey and dealing with her whole like, who is she kind of living up to the mantle of becoming this Jedi, and it kind of put everyone else like Finn and Poe and Rose on the back burner to where like they didn't really even matter in this, and it was a little disappointing to see that.
Yeah, there are just so many characters involved.
And then they
this new trilogy, and they keep adding more, and you just can't get as much of the characters that you want to see.
I cannot remember her name, but she was the person with that Poe had like a previous flame with, or
it was Zori Bliss. I believe.
It's like they added in like a couple new characters, but it's like they didn't really contribute anything other than like servicing the plot, which was a little disappointing. Because it's like the other like stormtrooper that Finn meets, it's like I don't really know why she's there.
It's interesting too. Yeah, I mean, in some ways, like they do represent some part of the world. Like Zori represents, these people who have been oppressed by the First Order, and then there's
that's where I like had my problems with, because it's like, I remember thinking about Force Awakens and Last Jedi. One of your main characters is a stormtrooper who defected, and you never see that anywhere else in the series. And then I saw that in Rise of Skywalker, where this other character is like, oh, our whole battalion like put on arms and we defected. I was like, that's really cool, and that's why I really would have appreciated them taking the time and exploring that. But this movie just moves and moves and moves. Where you didn't get to sit there and think about the implications of that or where it might lead to.
Yeah, the other thing too is Zori gets that like big thematic line about like the First Order wins by making you feel alone, right? Where it feels like that maybe should be tied in with one of the more major characters.
Yeah.
Give them more. Yeah, I agree. I think like Finn and Poe kind of feel like secondary plot movers. Just kind of like, I think Poe gets a bit of being the leader now. He's had his arc from The Last Jedi.
Yeah, you learn a lot more about him in this movie than you do in any of the other ones. But it's still...
Except I think you get quite a bit about him in The Last Jedi, too.
Yeah, but then... I just felt like this movie as a whole lacked... Even though they brought back, like, the Emperor, or brought back Palpatine and all that, and, like, the Sith planet... I just felt like there was a big like lack of conflict, because it felt like them searching and trying to find things, but like I didn't really feel like there was this like sense of urgency or I don't know.
Yeah, I felt it like on and off throughout. I think especially towards the end with like Palpatine.
Yeah, and I think a big reason of that is like, after The Last Jedi, you kill Snoke, and then Kylo Ren is in this weird position, so you don't really have like a villain to deal with. So I think they did, this is again where I think they did I think they did well with what they had from The Last Jedi, but it's again, I think it just results back to like a lack of an overarching story and plan like they do with
there's the point
Marvel.
Yeah, there's the point where Kylo, Leia sends the message, and he's kind of redeemed right there.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, there's Palpatine, but he was just kind of trying to control Kylo.
Yeah.
So it feels like right now there's not really a villain. Kylo's kind of been redeemed. He's Ben now. But then I think when Palpatine rises and then the two have to go against him, that's when I felt like, okay, this is a good evil thing that they're going to have to overcome. Super powerful,
but then
and
he just gets like pushed off to the side, and then Rey does her whole thing, and then he comes back, and then I don't know, it felt weird with like the whole force healing thing, because it was like she healed that serpent in the tunnel, and it was like you could see her like fiddling with her hand, like, oh, that hurt me to do that, and then later she stabs Kylo Ren and heals him, but there don't seem to be any repercussions of that. And then,
right, well, it's supposed to be like her using her life force, right?
Yeah, but it's like it doesn't really affect her. The fact that she stabbed Kylo Ren and then used her life force, it doesn't seem to like, she doesn't seem to take a toll from that. And then it comes back at the end where Kylo sacrifices himself for Ren, and so he dies because of it. But it's like it was hard for me to believe it that would be the repercussion, because I didn't really see any consequences of using her healing abilities.
That's pretty much exactly what I expected to happen.
Yeah.
At that point, like after Kylo got pushed, and then I knew like Rey's gonna, and then Kylo's gonna end up sacrificing himself to save her.
I would have loved to see like 30 minutes of them going back and forth, reviving each other. Just like, I revive you, now I'm dead, and then I revive you, now I'm dead.
So it's kind of like in Avengers Endgame with the whole like Natasha and Hawkeye.
Yeah, and then I think it was I think Kylo Ren was probably my favorite part of this, and Adam Driver of this whole trilogy, because I feel like he had the most enjoyable but also like thoughtful arc, to where like at the end of this it felt like it made sense for him to sacrifice himself, because that way he could be with his parents and also Rey could live on. I think that was interesting to see.
Right, he's been such an interesting villain to me, because I felt like in the beginning I can't take this guy seriously. You know, he's like a child.
Because it was like, I want to be like Darth Vader.
He doesn't seem like a big bad. I think like in The Last Jedi they started building him up towards that, and I think it would have been really interesting to see him be like the main villain of this movie.
Yeah, that's what it kind of seemed like, because at the beginning, like credits crawl, it was like he was seeking out the Emperor to destroy all those who sought to like destroy his reign or threaten his power. I thought that was interesting, but then it was kind of like he meets the Emperor. The Emperor goes, "Hey, I have all these ships," and then he goes, "Okay, I'm gonna go kill Rey." But he did have ulterior motives. But
he was never planning to really
that's
kill
what
Rey.
I really liked about The Last Jedi, is it took Kylo Ren from this like whiny teenager going, "I want to be like Darth Vader," to, "No, I want to kill all of that. I want to kill the past. I want to become something new." And that's what I liked.
Right. It still kind of feels like he follows that trajectory.
Yeah. Because then he comes back to the Darth Vader mask in this one, to where it's kind of muddled of what he wants. I don't know. I think that might be like a figuring out where to go from Last Jedi again.
Yeah. Honestly, it felt like they could have really gone anywhere with this movie.
Yeah.
So nothing was really going to surprise me, I feel like.
And it's difficult it's difficult figuring out what to do with Rey's like situation, because it's like in The Last Jedi it explicitly says your parents were no one, but at the same time, if you say your parents were like Skywalkers, then it's predictable, and then you have to think about like who else could her parents be, and then you have to
plenty of people.
Yeah, you just have to like figure out the logistics. And I know the big argument a lot of people are talking about is Star Wars isn't science fiction, it's science fantasy, and that's where like a suspension of disbelief about this magic force or space wizards and stuff kind of have to like become you got to remove some realism, which I understand.
Yeah, for me it's like this interesting balance of like Rian Johnson coming in and trying to make it a more I don't know, less of a blockbuster feel.
Yeah, it was more thought-provoking in a sense, to where it was harboring on the themes or ideas that like the Jedi aren't wholly good. There's where like this was brought up in the prequels too, which that's a whole nother situation, but it brings up those themes of like the Jedi aren't 100% good, and like the Luke Skywalker that everyone knows isn't who he truly is. And I thought that was like really interesting, and I liked it more than The Force Awakens too, just because it was more than just we're good story. We blow up big weapon. I don't know.
Yeah, what I was gonna say is like I don't know that Star Wars was ever really meant to be that.
Yeah.
So
meant to be
that's not
like,
what fans wanted it to be, obviously.
Yeah, I get
at
that.
At least most fans.
And I think that's where it comes from, is I I think that's where it gets down to, I don't think this trilogy should have been made, because it just felt rushed, and I don't know if I would have felt better without it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, it definitely seems like there should have been a solid plan from the beginning of where these characters were going to go, where the story was going to go, how everything was going to be resolved. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But that's not me saying that this movie is atrocious. I think there are some really like interesting things and like cool things, and I thought it was actually really funny too.
Yeah. I saw someone commenting about like how C-3PO was actually made funny in this film for the first time.
Yeah, and like he had his moment of. I thought it was interesting how he was like, I'm looking at my friends, but it's like he's looking at all these new characters who, like, some of them, like Poe, don't really even like him. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's hard for me to like even remember all the connections at this point, because I like forget. Well, not really, but like C-3PO's been here the whole time. You know, Chewie was there the whole time. Now he's with this new crew.
Yeah,
and
like when Lando sees Chewie, it's kind of like this moment of like, hey, how are you? And then I like remember like, oh yeah, they're great friends. I should remember that.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh man. And then when like Leia dies too, and Chewie's reaction to that. Yeah.
I feel like it was like a part of me was like, I don't know if this is the cynical side. It feels like an over compensation for like the lack of that in The Force Awakens, when like Leia reunites with everyone, and she just like doesn't acknowledge Chewie at all. I remember people were talking about that, and I thought that was funny.
And Chewie finally got his medal.
He did. Even though why did Maz Kanata have it? And I don't know.
Well, I thought that was Leia funny. Had it, right?
I don't know. Why give it to him then? Why not earlier?
Well, I think it was like a way of her passing it on from Leia to him. Yeah.
Dominic Monaghan's in this movie in the background, where he has a couple
definitely lines. That bothered my parents. They were questioning why a Hobbit was in a Star Wars movie. Yeah. And it's just J.J. Abrams, man.
Just J.J. Abrams.
Yeah, it was weird because it felt like he was kind of forced in, because he appears like a number of times, but he doesn't really have.
He has like a line or two.
Yeah, and Rose too is like completely destroyed.
Yeah,
in this movie.
Well, I think it's like, I remember seeing a lot of things where like people were like, oh, they did Rose dirty in this movie, and I was like, I was thinking there really wasn't a lot of like. Maybe this is me like missing things, but it's like, what would she had no part in this movie. It was hard for her to put her somewhere, because it didn't seem like she could do a whole lot. And that's not me saying like she's unimportant. It's just like, even Finn and Poe and the other characters, it just feels like they were largely unimportant.
Yeah, because there was so much they were trying to do, and they had these like already pretty primary characters that didn't really have solid things to do. So how can you squeeze in these secondary characters and give them an important role?
And there's one thing that bothered me, not one thing specific, or there's one thing that stuck out to me was Finn, before they sunk into the sand, was like, Rey, I never got to tell you. And it never comes up ever again. Like, he never explains what that is. And
I'm sure it's about her being a Palpatine, would be my
But why would Finn know that?
Because Leia knew it. I guess Leia
told
like, Finn.
He never comes clean, never says anything, and
it seems weird that he would be
the one. It seems like it was in there, or it was part of like a previous cut, and it's just like they didn't take it out. And I just don't know why it's in there.
I'm wondering if it's because they really wanted Leia to know, but they didn't really have the lines to back that up.
Yeah.
So they had like Finn kind of explain that Leia knew.
Yeah, and that was a hard thing for me to get around and like suspend my disbelief with like
all of
knowing that Carrie Fisher is dead, and like they can't really do anything more with her character unless they do CG, and then it causes a whole thing to where, like, I was really disappointed with her role in this film, just because she kind of largely just stands there, says a couple lines, and then says Ben, and then dies. It was.
I think they did well with her.
I think they did well with what they could have done, but it's like that's me coming from the angle of like, well, they couldn't have really. I wanted to know what they would have done with her, other than or knowing what they did now, or how she's not alive anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's been one of the hardest things of this new trilogy too, has been trying to, I don't know, you have these old characters like Han and Luke and Leia, but you want it to be about the new characters as well, but you still made them like integral parts of this movie or this trilogy. So how do you pass it on while these previous characters that we love seem like they should also be playing a major role?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To where, like, the more I think about it, the more I liked how they handled, like, Han Solo's death, because that was very closely related to Kylo Ren's arc of figuring out and being torn between being Ben or Kylo. I thought that was really interesting. And also with Luke, I don't know. I don't really know where I'm going with that.
Part of me wonders, like, if someone watches this trilogy, like a kid watches this trilogy in 10 years or maybe less than that, will it seem as weird as it does to us now with like how the way the trilogy went and everything? Or will it just feel like, oh yeah, those are the movies? And I wonder if it was, I don't know, I wasn't there when the first 3 came out, so I don't know if people were like upset about the directions they took with those. I
don't think so, because it was it's this interesting thing, because I remember seeing a video of people coming out after the premiere of Return of the Jedi, and everyone was so like elated and talking about how it was a great conclusion. And I honestly think it's because it's this thing they had never seen before, this space fantasy story that had never been done. And then I feel like now we're in this age where we're kind of spoiled with all, like, partly because a lot of people grew up with Star Wars and like have this picture in their mind of what it should be and what it isn't, but also like we're surrounded by big blockbuster fantasy movies like with Marvel and all that, to where it's hard for people to be wowed like that anymore.
So I'm curious, what was the reaction coming out of the theater for you, of the rest of the audience?
I think the reaction was mostly positive. I remember I was sitting next to a woman who was 100% like on an emotional roller coaster throughout the whole thing, towards like whenever something big would happen, they'd laugh or go, or, oh no, Ben. It was really funny. And I think a part of me was really like sad, because it was like, man, I wish I could do that. But I always have a hard time with that, because I'm thinking about the previous movies, and then also from like a filmmaking standpoint of like the writing and directing and acting and who they are, and it's like also like the news around Star Wars. It's interesting. So I think it was largely positive, but I also remember talking to a coworker, and they were like, what'd you think? And I was like, well, I thought it was all right. And they're like, yeah, I think that's most people's reaction. So I feel like it's pretty in the middle.
For me, it seems like it's been pretty, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Polarizing. I didn't really expect that after The Last Jedi. I guess I should have, because there are people that love The Last Jedi, and there are people that hated The Last Jedi. And of course, this movie's going to go in the opposite direction, so it's going to be the same. But in my theater, there was a huge round of applause as soon as the credits started rolling.
Really? Yeah. I didn't have that. Huh. I wonder if it's because I saw it at 9:30 in the morning.
That could be.
It's just been really interesting seeing the reactions online, to where like I've seen more than like any other movie of like people saying, I like this movie and now I don't care what you think about my opinion. And it feels like a lot of people are not leaving room for discussion, because I feel like, I don't know if it's like the small minority of toxic fans, or if it's the fact that this movie is so polarizing. It's the conclusion of a trilogy that's meant, or it's conclusion to a saga that's meant so much for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think that people are just kind of like worn out after all the discussion around The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
I kind of feel that way too, where I'm just like, I'm happy to let this be the conclusion and not really, linger on it too much. And I don't feel up for debating it with people necessarily.
Yeah, because my thought is like, I liked The Last Jedi, and I don't really think anyone's gonna like change my mind on that, because it's hard to like coerce people into thinking what you think when it regards like art and film.
Yeah, I have a hard time ranking like which ones I like more.
Yeah, I think because it changes a lot for me too. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Especially since they've all been like so different and have kind of like all done different things with the material. And I'm also not someone who's like, the Star Wars movies are a big part of like my life or anything.
Yeah.
And I know there are a lot of people that are.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have as big an impact for me. But
yeah,
I think I lean towards the side of liking this movie quite a bit, just as like a fun space adventure. Had a great conclusion, had some good themes. I think a lot of characters got overshadowed, and it was like the pacing was way off at the beginning, way too fast. And, but other than that, I think it was a good time, and I think it was a fair conclusion.
Yeah, even though I've seen it twice, it's a movie that I came out of going, I don't know if I'll watch it again.
I feel kind of the same way.
To where like I feel like with The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, I want to watch again. To where this one, I feel like it was such a fast paced, like long thing, to where I don't know if I felt like as invested in this one as I did the other ones. I don't know if it's because it's a conclusion or the third movie.
I feel like that's again like going against what Rian Johnson did, like, because The Last Jedi felt very like lingering, and there's the slow chase going on. Yeah. And there's kind of like moments and things, whereas in this one it's like always moving from one thing to the next, and always like move, and I was like, I can't breathe. Like it's giving me no
where it's
room
just like, hey,
process.
Here's this thing, and you're like, wait, but what about? No, never mind about that. Here's Lando, and you're like, huh, what?
There were quite a few times that I couldn't really follow what was going on.
Yeah, like there were lines or moments that I heard the second time watching it, going, oh, I missed that the first time, just because like I was so distracted and thinking about something that had just happened, to where I missed one line or the other.
Yeah, I think that's my biggest criticism. Is just they tried to squeeze way too much in when they, I think, should have tried to build a bit more upon the characters that they have, instead of introducing a whole bunch of new ones and trying to make it feel like this huge thing. Like, you can make it huge, but have it focus on these characters you've already developed. And, because like I think Rey and Kylo, or Rey and Ben, I'll say, got a good conclusion, but it felt like there should have been more.
I thought that was the most interesting part of this movie, was their dynamic and the relationship, and those like scenes where they're talking and fighting like through the Force. I thought those were the most interesting parts, just because they felt like they took their time and they slowed down a bit in those scenes.
Yeah, and I think the big theme of this film was like, there's that line of, the First Order wins if we feel alone. And that's Rey for most of it, is she feels like no one else can understand her, and she's the only one.
She's scared of who she really is. And it's, I think a big thing about it is also like to where like I remember reading a lot of things about like J.J. Abrams' other work, and how like a big theme in his things are you being able to choose your family, and your family isn't necessarily the one you're born with. And I think that's what this movie like did a lot with.
For sure. Because I mean, you see Luke and Leia at the end as basically like her parents. Obviously not her actual parents, though I heard someone mention that. I mean, I could see a theory floating out around that. There was a lot of kissing in the first trilogy.
Whoa.
But yeah, I mean, they become her spiritual parents, right? Luke.
Yeah, and because they're the ones that
to her.
They're kind of like surrogate parents.
Because she never really knew her parents, other than when she was a young child. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know that I have much more to say at the moment.
I don't think I do either.
Yeah. Well, once again, let us know what your thoughts are in the comments. We'd love to have some good discussion about this and hear what you guys think about it. And yeah, do you think that it went in a good direction? Was it a good conclusion? Should they have stuck more with Rian Johnson's themes? And yeah, so let us know in the comments down below, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Babu Frick was my favorite part of the movie.
That's the one thing we know. All right, goodbye.
Goodbye.